to digest the action at the end of this year's General Assembly. Our first person this week is Senator Karen Peterson. Senator Peterson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Julie.
You know, you surprised a lot of people last month when you announced you were not going to seek re-election and you were going to retire. You know, what brought you to that decision?
Well, you know, a couple of years ago when Senator Bunting announced his retirement, I never forgot what he said. He said, "You just know when it's time." And I remember thinking, I hope I know when it's time. And sure enough, I did. This past year, it became real apparent to me that after 4 terms, 14 years, that it was really time for me to slow down, just to do some things that I enjoy. Not that I didn't enjoy 14 years of constituent work and such, but it's time to do some different things. You know, like most people, I've worked my whole life and looked forward to a day that I can retire, and that day has come.
Was it a difficult decision or emotional, or just you knew it was time and that was it?
I knew it was time, but I kept going back and forth because as I talked to people about the possibility of retiring, they'd say, no, you can't. You have so much more to do. You have to get death penalty repealed and you have to do this. And I kept thinking, well, no matter how many terms I do, there'll still be things left at the end that need to be done. So other people can do it.
Right. You know, you've been in the Senate for 14 years, as you mentioned. Do you remember what got you into it in the first place?
I do indeed. Well, I had held public office back in the 1980s as president of Newcastle County Council for 8 years. And then I gave that up and just continued finishing my career at the Department of Labor, where I retired in 2001. And when I retired from the department, I took a job in the private sector, a very nice job, but I felt I just missed public policy issues. I really missed helping people with their problems. And it was a real stark reality to me that I needed to get back into that. So I decided to run for the Senate in my district, and it just so happened that the senator at the time announced his retirement, just around the time I was getting ready to announce my candidacy. So it worked out well. I mean, I had a primary election that first year. I won the primary and then won the general election. But you know, that was 14 years ago, and it's been a wonderful, challenging, rewarding 14 years.
You know, in recent years, though, you've had a lot of success, particularly in the arena of equal rights. You know, do you think that that's sort of a memorable moment for you? I mean, what in the 14 years, what really stands out as a moment?
There were a couple of moments, the first of which was not related to the legislature at all. And it involved a community in my district called Glenville that was destroyed in a flood in my first year in office. 168 homes were destroyed, and that became my life for about 2 years, and I mean on a daily basis. Getting those people out of there. It was no longer safe for people to live there. They had been flooded twice in 4 years. It was time to get them out, and that ended up being the largest buyout in United States history by local governments. There was no federal money involved in that. And we got 168 people out of there, paid fair market value for their houses, paid for relocation, and they're all safe now. So that was like the first big thing that came along in my legislative career. And then I think my open government legislation, opening the General Assembly to the public, it hadn't been open in 300 years, so that was pretty amazing. It took me 7 years to get that done, and it took the help of Speaker of the House Bob Gilligan, who teamed up with me in year 7 and said, we're going to get this done this year. So opening the General Assembly to the public. And then the next big one for me was the Child Victims Act. And that one to me was just really personal, having gotten to know many of the victims of child sex abuse who were barred by a 2-year statute of limitations, who couldn't get justice, and we were able to reopen that statute of limitations and allow them to file lawsuits against the people who abused them. So I think open government, the Child Victims Act, the Beau Biden Child Protection Act, all of those, criminal justice, I did a lot of criminal justice work.
What about the moment on the stairs when the governor signing the legislation for marriage equality? I think that was
That was amazing.
What was that like?
You know, it all happened so fast. I mean, I never imagined in my lifetime that I'd be able to get married.
Yeah.
You know, I got married at 63. You know, most people don't wait until they're 63 to get married, but it wasn't an option. And so things happened though very quickly. It was like bam, bam, bam. We got the sexual orientation discrimination bill passed for employment and housing and public accommodation. So that was like 1 year. Next year, civil unions. Right? And then we thought, okay, now it's going to be a couple of years, but it wasn't. You know, the very next year was marriage equality. And I think it had a lot to do with the people who were getting elected during that period of time. It wasn't that people's minds changed so much as new people, new blood was coming into the legislature.
So when you were with the Minner, during your tenure, during the Minner administration, you know, I think you fought very hard to add protections against sexual discrimination for people. And it just never happened, session after session after session. Do you feel like you sort of laid a foundation and that's sort of what helped pass some of these other bills and laws that help the LGBT community, you know, like you mentioned, 1 year, you know, subsequently? Do you think that that helped?
Well, I think the person who laid the foundation was Representative Bill Oberle, who for 11 years was a voice crying in the wilderness. You know, he was the one who was introducing these bills long before I was elected to the legislature. And he was the one who pushed. He's also the one who took all the heat for it, you know, the hate mail and the death threats and all that. So Bill Oberle was really the pioneer in that respect. But then along came a group called Equality Delaware, under Lisa Goodman and Mark Purpura and those folks, and they really organized. I mean, I think that they're the ones who actually pushed everything forward. Up to then, there were a couple of us who were talking about it, but until they organized, it didn't happen.
We're running out of time. Just a couple of quick fire questions. Death penalty going to get done in the near future?
I think the Supreme Court is going to do it for us.
Okay. And what's next for you?
What's next? Well, we're going to Disney World.
Yay!
I booked that months ago.
Okay. Well, have a great time.
Thank you. Thank
State
you.
Senator Karen Peterson, we always appreciate your time.
My
and
pleasure.
We wish you well. We will probably call on you a few more times for your opinions on the issues. And you can watch all of this interview at newsworks.org/Delaware.